String near 2 years of political dogfighting, the likes of which had rarely been experienced in modern history.
You call women you don't like fat pigs, dogs, slobs, and disgusting animals. Your Twitter account...
Only Rosie O'Donnell. The American people are sick and tired of hearing about your damn emails.
But you know, this poor, pathetic, low-energy guy. So I'm looking at little Marco and I say, man, there's something happening with him. We have Lion Ted Cruz. Well, the failing New York Times. It's Pocahontas, Elizabeth Warren, crooked Hillary Clinton.
You could put half of Trump supporters into what I call the basket of deplorables.
Reach of your dreams and your willingness to work hard for them.
Well, absolutely in the South for the result of this election.
I will look at it at the time.
On the last evening in February 2017, President Donald Trump spoke before the joint sessions of Congress and presented an offer of compromise between Republicans and Democrats.
I am asking all members of Congress to join me in dreaming big and bold and daring things for our country.
In most instances, this has not happened.
Divisive campaigns in the long term don't work. Dividing America is a mistake. It's not only unpatriotic, it's not good politics. In the old days, what we tried to do is we knew we got our base, and we wanted to expand that base and get the next guy. That works. That's good to bring the country together. And in the long run, that's going to work. In the short term, when you make people angry, they react right away. The next day they wake up in the morning, maybe the next year or the next 4 years, and say to themselves, oh boy, we better change this or we're going to be in big trouble.
Some lessons from the statewide and local elections held on November 7th in New Jersey, Virginia, and New York. These were the first major elections held since Mr. Trump became president. Normally, they are dominated by state and local issues. This year, they were a referendum on President Trump and the GOP Congress. Both lost. It was a referendum on the way President Trump won the election in 2016. An election he won by pitting one tribe against another, fomenting fear of unfamiliar religions, fear of immigrants with unfamiliar customs, and by injecting a toxic virus into the national discourse. History is filled with people who win that way, but few of those who come to power that way are ever able to use it. Their legacies are little remembered, but for the pain they caused and the mess they made.
My view is that we're entering into a situation of enormous instability, insecurity, fragility, and because I happen to believe that the best policy solutions lie in the center ground, then I want to see how does the center revitalize itself, how does it develop the policy agenda for the future, and how do we link up people who have the same basic ideas and attachments to the same basic values across the world.
This documentary film offers an examination of a philosophy that has been virtually ignored in politics today, from national to state to local elections. In California, the largest state in the nation, centrism has been bandied about with varying degrees of success. Most people think California is decidedly liberal. In fact, California evolved politically from a moderate Republican stronghold from 1860 to 1992, with the exception of the Roosevelt era.
Well, California has changed. It was historically a Republican state, but pretty moderate Republicans. Earl Warren was the governor of California, and he actually was nominated by both parties in the 40s. So we've changed now. Like a lot of parts of urban America, California has become a solidly Democratic state. It's just as blue as it can get. The partisanship is still bitter. It's just the state's party arrangements has drastically changed. And the guys left out, usually, are those of us in the middle. We're not sure if we fit the left, fit the right. We seem to be ignored by both sides.
The hard part for me about trying to be a centrist or trying to work across the aisle was that each party insists on absolute obedience. But you have to be 100%, or I used to say you have to be 110%. And no matter what, if you didn't say, I'll do whatever you want, you were ostracized.
I've been a Democrat since I've been 18 years old, and I'm a progressive Democrat in many ways, but I want the truth. And I'm not left or right, I just want what's the right thing to do. And if you're not with the Marin Democratic Party from A through Z, if you challenge the Democratic Party, if you have critical thinking, you are demonized and you are just bashed with your pro-Trump. And if they say it enough, the establishment, people do believe that. And that's what's really sad.
California has a history of vigorous debate. Now, for a whole lot of reasons, California has changed. California is now a state of 38 million people. Earlier in California's history, less people, a lot more Republicans, and a lot of difference really between Southern California and Northern California. While that still exists, there is still an opportunity to have vigorous debate, although a lot of it now has become very, very partisan.
According to the political author Arnold Kling, our political discourse is dysfunctional because we look at the world through lenses that our political opponents do not share. We are awash in ideological blind spots. For example, liberals see the world as a battle between victims and oppressors. Conservatives see the world as a battle between civilization and barbarism. Libertarians see the world as a battle between freedom and coercion. Take almost any issue and you see the debate play out along these lines.
Politics is often reduced to shorthand. And when it's reduced to shorthand, then you're labeled by the 10 issues that are being debated. That's part of the polarization that's been a problem. I can't label any individual by how they feel about 6, 7, 10 issues, or at least I shouldn't, because that makes it a problematic thing when I just assume that you have a certain opinion about something, therefore you are Republican, you're a Democrat, you're a progressive, you're a socialist, you are whatever. We label people too much and too often, and I don't think it does in body politics very well to do that.
Militant centrist is not somebody that simply divides down the middle from the left and the right. It combines the best of the left, best of the far left even, and the best of the right, the far right even, and tries to bring what's good and best from each party, each ideology together, trying to take off the rough edges, respect the people involved, and try to come up with something that actually works.
According to Wikipedia, an independent voter, often called an unaffiliated voter in the United States, is a voter who does not align themselves with a political party. In California, voters who registered to vote without stating a political party are known as no-party preference voters, formerly known as decline-to-state voters. According to us.centrist.org, centrists don't have party lines. Centrists believe that solutions are more important than bias. While there's no set rule for what a centrist is, there are some generally accepted guidelines that seem to depict the centrist mode of thought. Centrism is a political ideology based on reason and pragmatism, considered of short and long-term thinking.
I think California has long been a state of compromise with a centrist point of view. We've often had a governor of one party and a legislature of another party, and a mix there that forces compromise and forces people to come to the center. Currently, our entire government is run by Democrats. However, we have a very centrist governor. So I think we do tend to be centrist, even though those in other parts of this country might think that we are far to the left. We are liberal, yes, but we have a long history of centrism. This county, Marin County, was long represented by Republicans who really started the environmental movement. So in many ways, we are atypical of the polarization that you see now, particularly at the national level.
When I would write a bill with someone like a Keith Richmond, who was a moderate Republican assembly member, physician from Southern California, people just, wouldn't even touch it. Keith and I wrote a series of bills that provided for universal health care, which is a big deal for a Republican to agree to, right? We did that, and that was in 2005 and 2006. And we could not get that bill out of committee, even though that's basically that bill more or less became Obamacare 2-3 years later. You can go to Sacramento or Washington or the Board of Supervisors or whatever, and if your objective is to get things done, then by definition you have to compromise a little bit. But the parties don't want compromise at all. And so that's one of the reasons not much gets done.
Centrism is not defined by compromise or moderation. It is considered of them. Centrism is about achieving common sense solutions that appropriately address current and future needs, support the public trust, and serve the common good with consideration of risk and capacity and context of these needs. How did this happen, and are we permanently polarized?
Today, with social media and television and other mediums, we now instantly learn what somebody has said today. That's different than in the colonial days, as an example, where it took weeks for anybody to hear what Thomas Jefferson may have said about some subject. It allowed for more contemplation then. Today, we're instantly having to respond to something that somebody says or something that goes on. It requires a little bit more thinking, and I think sometimes when people set that aside, we end up with a lot of vitriol that isn't necessary.
It didn't used to be that you could turn on the television or go to any website, but you could not pick your own facts. You couldn't say, well, I believe these facts, or I believe these alternative facts. There was sort of a common standard, right? Everyone believed Walter Cronkite. Right? I mean, people had go-to sources. You could go to the New York Times. You could go to those sort of news outlets that people trusted, and that doesn't exist anymore. And so I think as those have gotten more powerful, these fringe media organizations have gotten more powerful. The people who play to them have just gotten more extreme over time as well. And so I think that's really the as much as anything. So I don't think the issues are that much tougher. I think the issues are probably about the same as they were, but we're farther apart than we've ever been.
Well, what happens is there's signs that turn people into identifying issues with one party or the other. They listen to talk radio, or they listen to television. They listen to Rachel Maddow if they're a liberal. They listen to Rush Limbaugh if you're a far-right person. And they give them the sign. They give them the message, this is our belief. Global warming is a good example. If you're opposed to global warming and it's a big deal, you must be a Democrat. And if you don't care about it and you believe it's fake, you must be a Republican. That's crazy. 20 years ago, people like John McCain were stepping up and we're talking about global warming.
Our environment in peril. Oil and food prices out of control. Climate change wreaks havoc with deadly weather. One extreme thinks high taxes and crippling regulation is the solution. Another denies the problem even exists. There's a better way.
I believe that climate change is real.
It's not just a greenhouse gas issue. It's a national security issue. We have an obligation to future generations to take action and fix it.
I'm John McCain, and I approve this message.
You can be fiscally conservative and socially liberal. That's what a moderate quite often is. So it's the kind of center we're trying to recreate. The problem today is that so much is identified almost by tribe. There are two tribes in America. One's the red tribe, the other's the blue tribe. That's all that counts. It doesn't work out very well anywhere in the world when people start just identifying by tribe. But we identify topics. Abortion might be a topic. Bicycling might be a topic, and we associate it with one's the Democratic position, one's the Republican position. It's ridiculous. It is not. It's a people's position. If you're for or against one of those things, God bless you. That's a topic to be proud of. But whether the Democrats are for or the Republicans, who cares?
It's a false assumption that you cannot be fiscally conservative and be liberal at the same time. You can. If you are not fiscally responsible, you are not going to be able to implement the liberal programs that you want to, such as education, health care, equity, above all things. These are things that need fiscal conservancy so that we can provide for them in our communities.
What other factors play a role?
The 24/7 campaign is not only exhausting, it hurts us. There are too many opportunities for negative campaigning, and it's too much before the public. We need to have our candidates before the public, but we don't need an onslaught constantly of negative campaigning. And the negative campaigning is creating division in our communities in our country and among our elected officials, and creating an environment in which it makes it very difficult to get work done.
The 24-hour campaign cycle is destructive. There's just simply no way to get away from it. There are all sorts of folks that have that car radio on or the home television on constantly, and they're inundated with this stuff. They click on the media and they find out stuff that they want to hear about themselves. You can't get away from it, and it's destroying our ability to go past politics and work with each other. If all we do is talk about who's a Democrat, who's a Republican, nothing ever gets accomplished.
Well, it's horrible for California, it's horrible for the candidates, but more importantly, it's horrible for the electorate. The idea that every minute of your day you're consumed by a position that some politician is taking, or you're receiving something in the mail, or you turn on the radio, or you watch your television, and you're getting inundated by political advertising, which, by the way, is always skewed to that candidate's point of view and story. This creates an atmosphere where it actually turns people off from politics.
You know, from a candidate's point of view, I've been a candidate for city council myself, and it was a very short race in the old days. 3 months, 4 months was a sprint. Now, 2, 3 years before people start running. If you're going to run for Congress here in the North Bay, you better start now for 2020 or 2022. It's ridiculous, and what it does is it takes normal people out of the political process. Normal people will spend a little time campaigning, but they have a real life. When you have people who are only in politics, all they care about is politics, they're delighted to go 2 or 3 years, and we ended up with a bunch of mediocrities on both sides of the aisle.
If you had a compacted electoral schedule, you would do much better with that. So in a lot of places around the world, they actually have laws that say you can't start a campaign until a certain time in front of the election. In California, we might benefit from that. The problem is that it really divides the electorate, probably more than they should be, and it also is fatiguing to the electorate. The electorate wants to learn the issues, decide who they want to vote for, and call it a day.
I think there has always been a tendency to move to negative campaigning, but I do think they're nastier than ever because of the wide variety of media available to campaigns and because of the huge influx of money into campaigns. I think their campaigns today are wealthier and more negative than they've ever been.
When you look at the dollars that are given to candidates and to causes, the money today just dwarfs anything we saw in the past. You didn't have to, when you ran for statewide office in California, today, you have to raise $20 to $30 million to be a serious candidate. That's not the case even 10 or 15 or so years ago. So, and it's not just that, I think you have to have that relationship with you've got to have that tight relationship with the lobbyists as well out there because they become so much more powerful.
Does age play a role?
Well, age does make a difference. I think if you take a look at younger people, say than me, 30s, 40s, 20s, they can be very different on social issues from a lot of people, they're senior. Social issues are the big dichotomy in age today in America. Not so much economics. You're going to find liberals and conservatives on economics at 20. But when it comes to social issues, folks have changed their opinions. It's a different America among young people from old.
I think there's a difference based on the age of voters as to how they view polarization. I think younger voters today tend to be optimistic. I think they're optimistic, but they haven't had long experience in the political realm to see how the polarization develops over time. As an older voter, I see the polarization. I see the negative attitudes, particularly of older generations, feeling that they have gotten theirs, they are patriotic, and they don't understand sometimes what younger voters are saying and what their optimism is. That's very similar to during the 60s, when the older generation was patriotic and didn't understand why the younger generation was opposed to the war in Vietnam. I think there are many parallels that can be drawn. I think those middle voters, like the age of my children that are in their 40s, I think they are very concerned. I think they have been drawn into the negative politics, and I think it tends to turn them off. while I still think that the younger voters are more excited and wanting to get into changing the world right now.
It's not just there, it's, it's in Florida, where kids, had lost friends to gun violence. It's across the country that I think it's happening. I mean, the numbers of 17-year-olds who are pre-registering to vote in the elections is just off the charts. And so it's a really positive trend. And that's probably the thing that gives me hope.
It's been so clear to me over many, many years that we have done a very poor job of getting young people involved in politics. They have opinions, they even threaten to vote, but on election day they don't come out and vote. And it's sad, I think, because they don't see anybody that looks like them. We don't have young people running for office. Just in my own world, I was very young when I ran for a local city council, and when I won, I was the youngest person on the council, and I'd go out and speak to high schools and colleges, and as young as I was, I didn't identify with anybody because I was still 8 years older or 10 years older than the students I was speaking with.
The youth are absolutely involved. What's great about Petaluma is we actually have a youth commission here in town, and people from 14 to 22 can serve on that. But beyond that, if they're not on the youth commission, because of the way social media and all those platforms are, I know the youth of today are getting even more and more involved. You see what's happening nationally, but also locally here, they're really following the process of what's happening in their backyard. So fortunately, I know there's some negativity sometimes about social media all the time, but now I think that the youth of today can actually leverage that. They can do good things and they can stay involved.
Why is compromise on major issues so hard in democratic politics when no one doubts that it's necessary? The resistance to compromise is a problem for any democracy because it stands in the way of change that nearly everyone agrees is necessary and therefore biases the political process in favor of the status quo.
Donald Trump did not divide the Republican Party. He won the nomination of a party that was already divided. Bernie Sanders did not divide the Democratic Party. He exploited divisions in an already divided Democratic Party. A crack-up and realignment of both parties is inevitable. It is happening before our eyes, and not even the wisest sages of our time know how that story will end.
This phenomenon is not just something we're imagining. It's, if you look at the data, and I'm a data guy, I look at the numbers. If you look at the data, it used to be that, Republicans and Democrats would cross over and they would help each other and they would support each other. So they would say, okay, we agree in principle on this, let's move this along. And over time, that's gotten farther and farther apart. And so the number of Democrats who cross over and the number of Republicans who cross over and who vote for the opposite party is almost zero. And they quantified it where they actually said, well, let's look at the numbers. And so you look at the numbers and you say, how many times does someone cross over and vote, one way or the other? And it just doesn't happen anymore today, unfortunately. And I don't know how to fix that, except to elect better people.
There's no question in the short range, the parties are going to get further and further apart. Sorry to sound like a pessimist, but that's what the reality is. I don't see us getting better. I don't see people coming together and working together on an American scale, not on a town-by-town scale, but on an American scale, and something really cataclysmic happens. World War II did it. The Depression did it. The Depression put people together. It had its good side. It was horrible for most people, but until something big happens, we're going to drift along further and further, and it's not good for the country.
Republicans used to believe in a market-driven economy, free trade, immigration, a muscular foreign policy. Those in the party that still believe in those ideas are now challenged by economic nationalists, nativists, tribalists, and those intolerant of unfamiliar religions. Democrats who once believed that capitalism created a bigger pie for all are now challenged by socialists, wealth redistributors. America no longer has two strong political parties. It has two crumbling parties facing a cataclysm inside their own tent.
I often say that this is a big, broad-shouldered nation. If you study your nation's history, you realize that we've gone through ebbs and flows, ups and downs, and we are in a tough time right now where maybe 50% of the country feels one way and 50% feels the other way. Eventually there will be issues and people who will galvanize this country. And we'll be right back into an upcycle where most of the country believes in one candidate, in one party, in one platform. But we're not there right now, but we'll get there again, I guarantee it.
From chaos, however, comes opportunity. When all are shouting the toxic chants of discord and division, it creates a market for voices that sing a more appealing song, those who inspire rather than denigrate, those who offer harmony over discord, those who promote ideals instead of acrimony, those with the courage to rise above the toxic din of our time. Machiavelli once said that the means of acquiring power determines whether they keep it. His way of saying that those who come to power by appealing to our better angels are the only ones truly endowed with the power to use it.
We thirst for inspiration and we thirst for leadership. And I think we will have that in the future. I think there are some very exciting middle-aged and younger potential candidates out there right now that are developing their campaigns, and many of them are women, and that is really good news. The day we see a Congress that really represents us ethnically and in terms of our genders, that is the day that I look forward to.
Women have to step up. They first have to actually run for office, and they can start locally. And there's a difference between just speaking up on social media or speaking up with your coffee groups, but it's important to actually run for office, put your name on the ballot, and make positive change.
I'm London Bree. I am president of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors and soon to be mayor of the city and county of San Francisco.
It's an historic moment in San Francisco City Hall history. London Breed will be the first woman of color to serve as mayor and the only female mayor currently at the helm in any of the top 15 largest cities in the United States.
It's really amazing, and it's really an honor.
If you've kept up with the news, you've seen or heard the story about a 28-year-old who defeated a 10-term Democrat congressman in New York. Her name is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a woman who less than a year ago was working as a waitress. No one took her seriously until she won. She defeated a man many thought would someday become Speaker of the House. A man who raised $3 million, outspent her 18-1 and lost. So dismissive was the smart set that not even the New York Times covered her campaign. And I don't care if you're a Republican or Democrat, liberal or conservative, there is something for all to learn from the strategy she employed. Because she did not have the money to do thousands of glossy mail pieces or other forms of conventional advertising, she resorted to the only thing she could do. She posted a video, one that she wrote herself. By election day, it had been viewed more than 2 million times.
I'm gonna grab her. She's right here. I can't let you know. She's looking at herself on television right now. How are you feeling? Can you put it into words? Nope. I cannot put this into words. All right, your supporters here are going to be excited for you. It was a grassroots campaign. Can you believe the numbers that you're seeing right now?
I cannot believe these numbers right now, but I do know that every single person here has worked their butt off to change the future of the Bronx State. Well, I think what we've seen is that working class Americans want a clear champion, and there is nothing radical about moral clarity.
Oh yeah, I served on the city council for 12 years in Petaluma. Now I am running for mayor of Petaluma. And it is a nonpartisan position, and what I've always told people is that there's not a partisan way to fill a pothole. And so I think if you come from that premise and look in the good of people and always don't look at them as the enemy, then you can start from a position of strength and be positive. When people run for Congress, they're in DC. When people run for state assembly, they're in Sacramento, and they can hide in those cities. But when you're in local elected positions, especially nonpartisan positions like city council and mayor, you see people at the grocery store, you see people at Little League, so you have to articulate your vision to them, and you can't hide somewhere. You're going to see them downtown all the time.